Why, so you guys have really sent us some pretty heavy stuff this time around.
Yeah.
We've got all these news articles about that awful helicopter crash that happened in the Hudson River just yesterday, April 10th. And then kind of alongside that, we've got these articles about Anchor raising prices because of the tariffs that the U.S. has been slapping on Chinese goods.
Right.
And so I see you've also pulled in a Reddit thread where people are discussing helicopter lift. I guess to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how helicopters actually work.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought it'd be helpful to have some more technical explanations alongside the news report. So we got some excerpts from the FAA Helicopter Flying Handbook too,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and then to round things out, there's a Wikipedia entry on tariffs, just to give us some background on how those work and the kind of arguments for and against them.
I feel like we're going to be kind of jumping back and forth between like a really intense uh kind of a tragic story and then some pretty dry economic stuff.
Yeah, it is a bit of an unusual combination of sources, but I think there are some interesting connections to be made.
I'm sure you're gonna connect the dots for us. So, where should we even begin?
Well, I think the best place to start is with acknowledging the tragedy that's happened, the helicopter crash in the Hudson.
Right.
All six people on board were killed, and this included a family of Spanish tourists.
Yeah, it's just awful. The father, his name was Agustin Escobar. He was a Siemens executive.
Right.
His wife, Merce Camprubí Montal, and their three kids. They were just 4, 5, and 11 years old.
Just a devastating loss, and of course the pilot was also killed.
Yeah, I mean, what do we know about what happened?
Well, from the news articles you've sent, it looks like it happened yesterday, April 10th, right in the Hudson River between New York and New Jersey.
Okay.
The helicopter was um, a Bell 206 operated by a company called New York Helicopters.
Okay.
And the registration number, in case anybody's interested, is N216MH.
Got it.
And it seems like it crashed after what they're calling an in-flight breakup.
In-flight breakup. What does that even mean?
Well, essentially it means the helicopter broke apart while it was still in the air.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the flight, it's kind of interesting. It originated and was going back to the downtown Manhattan heliport. So it seems like it was just a short, sightseeing tour or something.
Huh. Okay. So not a very long flight then.
No, not at all.
Well, one thing that really stuck out to me in the reports was this detail about the pilot radioing and that he needed fuel.
Yeah, that's definitely a red flag.
I mean, that combined with, the helicopter just breaking apart in the air, it really makes you wonder what was going on there.
Yeah, it's hard not to speculate. And that Reddit thread you sent, there are some people chiming in with their theories.
Oh, really?
Some are suggesting that they saw a very fast descent in the footage they've seen, and some are pointing to the fact that the main rotor assembly seems to have detached.
Oh, wow.
But, and this is interesting, some people think it might have still been auto-rotating.
On a rotating. What is that?
We'll get into that a little bit more later. But essentially, it's a way for a helicopter to descend safely, even if the engine fails.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, some users are saying they saw the tail boom separate from the helicopter as well.
So, like, major pieces of the aircraft were just coming off.
Yeah, it seems like it.
I mean, that sounds
It
terrifying.
must have been. And, on Reddit, people are throwing out all sorts of ideas about what might have caused it: mechanical failure, gearbox issues, maybe even the main rotor hitting the tail boom, what they call a rotor strike.
Wow.
And then there's this one user who claims to have seen a video of the pilot, he calls it hot dogging around town earlier.
Hot dogging, like showing off.
Yeah, like doing some risky maneuvers. So this user is suggesting maybe it was something called mass bumping.
Mass bumping. I've never heard of that.
It's basically when the rotor blades hit the mast, the central part of the helicopter that connects the rotor to the fuselage.
Oh, okay.
But, it's really important to remember that these are just theories at this point.
Right, right. The speculation.
The official investigation will have to determine the actual cause.
Of course, of course.
Yeah,
But it's natural to wonder what might have happened.
absolutely. And it does bring up this important concept of auto rotation that I mentioned earlier.
Right, right. So tell me more about that. How does a helicopter stay in the air if the engine fails?
Well, luckily, helicopters are designed with this safety feature built in. The FAA handbook describes auto rotation as, let me see, a controlled descent in which the main rotor system is driven by the upward flow of air through the rotor.
Okay, so the air itself keeps the blades spinning.
Exactly. It's not like an airplane where if the engine quits, you're just a glider. With a helicopter, if you enter auto rotation correctly, you can actually make a controlled landing.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
It is. One of the Reddit users described it as the difference between a helicopter becoming a stone in the sky versus being able to land somewhat safely.
Yeah, I can see that. So is auto rotation something that pilots practice?
Oh, absolutely. It's a mandatory skill that all helicopter pilots have to demonstrate.
Wow, that really makes you realize that there's a certain level of inherent risk in flying a helicopter.
Yeah, for sure. And, reading through the comments on that Reddit thread, it seems like there are some concerns about the safety of tourist helicopter operations specifically.
Really?
Yeah, some users are suggesting that these types of flights might have a higher accident rate compared to, say, emergency medical services helicopters or other work helicopters.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. If they're flying more frequently, maybe over more populated areas.
Right. And some of the users are suggesting that maybe there are some factors that make it riskier. Like maybe they try to pack in as many passengers as possible to maximize profits.
Right.
Or maybe they skimp on fuel to save money.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah. And there are also concerns about whether the pilots in these tourist operations always have as much experience as, say, a pilot who's flying for the Coast Guard or something like that.
Hmm. That's something to think about.
And, some people are even bringing up the 2018 helicopter crash that also happened in the Hudson River.
Right.
They're wondering if maybe there are some systemic issues with these tourist helicopter operations that need to be addressed.
Yeah, it's definitely a cause for concern. So what about the immediate aftermath of this latest crash? What have we heard?
Well, the news reports are saying that NYPD and FDNY divers were on the scene really quickly,
Okay.
and they've been working to recover the victims. It's a tough job, but it's essential.
Absolutely. So I think we've covered the crash itself pretty well.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to take a step back now and maybe try to understand how these machines even work in the first place.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it is pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah.
How does a helicopter even stay up in the air?
Exactly.
Well, the FAA handbook, it lays it out pretty clearly. It says that a helicopter generates lift by using aerodynamic force.
Aerodynamic force.
Yeah, it's basically the force created by the rotor blades as they spin and push air downward.
So it's kind of like a fan blowing air down.
Kind of, but on a much larger scale and with much more powerful forces at play. The handbook talks about four main forces that are acting on a helicopter when it's in flight: weight, thrust, drag, and lift.
Okay, wait, I get that. That's just gravity pulling it down.
Right. And then thrust is the force that's pushing the helicopter forward or upward that's generated by the rotors.
Okay.
Drag is the resistance the helicopter faces as it moves through the air,
Yeah.
like friction.
Got it. And lift is what keeps it up.
Exactly. Lift is the force that opposes weight and allows the helicopter to stay airborne.
Okay, so how do the rotor blades actually create lift?
Well, that's where things get a bit more complicated. That Reddit thread you sent, there was some pretty lively discussion about the physics involved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some people were talking about Bernoulli's principle, which is this idea that faster moving air has lower pressure.
Okay.
So they were saying that the curved shape of the rotor blade creates a difference in airspeed between the top and bottom surfaces.
Okay, I'm following so far.
And that difference in airspeed creates a difference in pressure, with lower pressure on top and higher pressure on the bottom. And that's what generates lift.
Makes sense. So it's kind of like how an airplane wing works?
Kind of,
Yeah.
but it's not the whole story. Some of the other users on Reddit pointed out that you can't just have lift from a pressure difference.
Oh.
You need to actually be moving air downward. So they brought up Newton's third law.
For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as the rotor blades push air down, that downward air pushes back up on the blades, creating lift.
Okay, so it's both Bernoulli's principle and Newton's third law working together?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. They're both playing a role, but the downward deflection of air is essential.
Got it. So the shape of the rotor blades is important, but it's not just about creating that pressure difference. It's also about moving air downward.
Exactly. And the FAA handbook talks about two different types of airfoils: symmetrical and non-symmetrical.
Airfoils.
Yeah, that's just the technical term for the shape of a wing or a rotor blade.
Oh, okay.
So symmetrical airfoils are the same shape on the top and bottom, while non-symmetrical airfoils have a different shape on the top than on the bottom.
Okay. And which one do helicopters use?
Well, the handbook says that most light helicopters, like the Bell 206 that crash, they use symmetrical airfoils for their main rotor blades.
Interesting. So if they're symmetrical, how do they generate lift?
Well, that's where the angle of attack comes in.
Angle attack.
Yeah, it's also called AOA. It's basically the angle between the chord line of the rotor blade and the relative wind.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the chord line?
Imagine a straight line running from the front edge of the rotor blade to the back edge. That's the chord line.
Okay, got it. And relative wind.
It's the direction the air is flowing relative to the rotor blade.
Yeah.
But it's not just the wind that's blowing.
Oh.
You also have to factor in the induced flow, which is the downward flow of air created by the rotor itself.
So the rotor is actually changing the airflow around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that changes the angle of attack.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So the pilot can adjust the angle of attack to control how much lift the rotor blades generate.
Precisely. And they do that using two main controls, the cyclic and the collective.
The cyclic and the collective.
Yeah, the cyclic is kind of like the joystick in a video game.
Okay.
It allows the pilot to tilt the rotor disc forward, backward, or sideways, which controls the direction the helicopter moves.
So it's for maneuvering.
Exactly. And then the collective is a lever that controls the pitch of all the rotor blades at the same time.
Pitch.
Yeah, the angle of the blades. So if the pilot wants to go up, they increase the collective pitch, which increases the lift and makes the helicopter climb.
Oh, okay.
And to descend, they decrease the collective pitch.
Makes sense. So cyclic for maneuvering, collective for going up and down. What else is there?
Well, there's one more crucial component, the tail rotor.
Oh, right. The little one on the back.
Exactly. You see, as the main rotor spins, it creates a lot of torque.
Torque.
Yes, a twisting force. And that torque would actually make the helicopter spin uncontrollably in the opposite direction of the main rotor.
Oh, wow. So the tail rotor is there to stop that from happening.
Exactly. It provides a counteracting force that keeps the helicopter stable and allows the pilot to control the direction it's pointing.
Wow. So there's a lot going on to keep a helicopter in the air.
It's a very complex system with a lot of moving parts that all have to work together perfectly.
It kind of makes you appreciate the skill of helicopter pilots even more.
Absolutely. They have to manage all these different systems at the same time while also navigating and dealing with changing weather conditions.
So are we thinking that that maybe one of these systems malfunctioned in the Hudson River crash?
It's possible,
Mm-hmm.
but it's too early to say for sure. The investigators will have to piece together what happened based on the evidence they find.
Right, right. Well, I think we've done a good job of digging into the technical aspects of this story.
Yeah.
But what about the other side of things? The tariffs and the price increases. It feels like a completely different topic.
It does, but I think it's just as important to understand. These economic forces are having a real impact on people's lives.
Okay, so remind me, what exactly are these new tariffs?
Well, the U.S. has been steadily increasing tariffs on goods imported from China. And recently, they added another big chunk, bringing the total tariff rate on some items up to 145%.
145%, that's
Mhm.
huge.
It is. And that comes on top of an additional 50% import duty that was imposed earlier this month.
Wow, so things are getting really expensive to import from China.
Yeah, and unsurprisingly, China has retaliated by raising their tariffs on U.S. goods to 125%.
So it's like a trade war.
That's what a lot of people are calling it.
And how is this affecting Anchor?
Well, they manufacture a lot of their products in China and then sell them here in the U.S.
Right, they make those portable chargers and headphones and all sorts of electronics.
Exactly. So with these new tariffs, their costs have gone way up, and they're passing those costs on to consumers.
Meaning they're raising prices.
Exactly. The reports say they've already increased prices on over 120 of their products, with an average price hike of about 18%.
Wow, so we're already seeing the impact of these tariffs in our wallets.
Yeah, and it's not just Anchor. The Digital Watch Observatory, they're reporting that a lot of Chinese sellers on platforms like Amazon are in a tough spot. They have to decide whether to keep raising prices and risk losing customers, or maybe even pull out of the U.S. market altogether.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's creating a lot of uncertainty for both businesses and consumers.
Mashable also mentioned that Nintendo is delaying pre-orders for their new Switch 2.
Really?
Yeah, I guess they're trying to figure out how much they'll need to charge for it with these new tariffs in place.
That makes sense. So it seems like this is having a ripple effect across multiple industries.
Definitely. So what's the big picture here? Are these tariffs good or bad for the economy?
Well, that's a complex question. The Wikipedia article on tariffs points out that there's actually a pretty strong consensus among economists that tariffs are generally harmful to economic growth.
Really?
Yeah, they argue that even though tariffs might be intended to protect domestic industries, they often end up hurting them too.
How so?
Well, for one thing, a lot of businesses rely on imported components or raw materials. So when those become more expensive because of tariffs, it increases their costs and makes them less competitive.
Hadn't thought of that.
And then there's the risk of retaliation. When we put tariffs on Chinese goods, they often retaliate by putting tariffs on our goods.
Right, so it escalates into this back and forth trade war.
Exactly. And that just hurts everyone involved.
Yeah, it sounds messy.
It can be. And then, of course, there's the impact on consumers.
Right, we're the ones who end up paying higher prices.
Exactly. The Council on Foreign Relations explains that a tariff is essentially a tax on imports, and most of that tax gets passed on to consumers.
So even if the goal is to encourage people to buy American-made products, it doesn't always work out that way.
Not necessarily. It can just make everything more expensive for everyone.
Okay, but the Wikipedia article did mention some arguments in favor of tariffs, right?
Yeah, there are a few. Some people argue that tariffs are necessary to protect domestic industries from dumping. Yeah, that's when foreign companies sell goods at really low prices, often below their cost of production.
Oh, I see. So it's like predatory pricing.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And the argument is that this can drive domestic companies out of business.
Okay, I can see that.
And then there's the idea of using tariffs to protect infant industries.
Infant industries.
Yeah, that's new industries that are just starting out.
Okay.
So the idea is that you give them some temporary protection from foreign competition so they can get established.
Interesting.
But, the problem is that it can be hard to remove those tariffs once they're in place.
Oh, so it's like creating a crutch that the industry becomes dependent on?
Exactly.
So it sounds like most economists agree that tariffs generally do more harm than good.
That seems to be the consensus. But, the Council on Foreign Relations points out that President Trump has really been pushing for tariffs as a way to address trade imbalances and what he sees as unfair trade practices.
So this isn't just an academic debate, it's actually playing out in real life right now.
Exactly. And Anchor's price increases are just one example of how these policies are affecting people.
It's kind of crazy to think that these big global economic decisions can have such a direct impact on the price of a pair of headphones or a phone charger.
Yeah, it really shows how interconnected the world is.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from a tragic helicopter crash to the complexities of helicopter flight to the ins and outs of international trade.
It's been a wide-ranging discussion for sure.
But I think it all ties back to this idea that things are more complicated than they often seem.
Absolutely. We've seen how a seemingly local event, like a helicopter crash in New York City, can raise questions about safety regulations, pilot training, and even the economic pressures that might influence how these tourist operations are run.
Right. And then on the other side of things, we've seen how these global trade policies can have a very real impact on consumers here in the U.S.
Exactly. The price of the electronics we buy, the availability of certain products, it's all tied into this complex web of global trade.
So, as always, the takeaway for our listeners is to think critically, to dig deeper, and to try to understand the forces that are shaping our world.
Absolutely. And I think this episode has given us a lot to think about. The helicopter crash, it reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of safety. And the tariffs, they highlight the interconnectedness of the global economy and the unintended consequences that can arise from government policies.
So I guess the question for our listeners is, what other unseen forces are out there shaping our lives?
Yeah, what are the things we take for granted, the systems we don't even think about that are actually having a profound impact on our everyday experiences? It's worth taking a moment to reflect on that.
Absolutely. So keep those questions in mind, listeners, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Until then.